All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fully Managed podcast. You guys know what we do here. We talk about marketing and business tips, and we assist you guys in your business journeys. I'm your host, Daniela, and I'm Pedgi's partnership coordinator. And I'm really excited. We have a great guest today with us today, Andrew Madden from Madden Creative. Hi, Andrew. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks, Daniela. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm so excited for the podcast. But before we get it going, I do want to start with a little game. Um, I'm just going to read you two things, and I want you to tell me if which one is real and which one is fake. Okay. All right.
Sounds good.
So the first one, which one of these two was an actual real product? Oh, the PlayStation, or a cologne called Fresh Kicks. So two perfumes, Oh, the PlayStation or Fresh Kicks.
Man, that's a tough one. I want to say the second one, but the first one sounds so ridiculous that it has to be real.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, the PlayStation is real. I don't know what it's like to smell like a PlayStation,
Uh,
but it was real. It was in the market. Um, Next one. Which design trend has existed? Brutalism in web design or invisible buttons, where you kind of have just to guess where to click?
let's go with invisible buttons.
It's brutalism,
Okay.
apparently. Yeah, I was also like invisible buttons made more sense, but Um and then last one, which one of these was an actual brand, like campaign that a brand did? A fast food chain creating a hotel where guests can eat in bed, or a cereal company that launched a dating app for breakfast lovers?
Wow. Both sound like $1 million ideas. Let's go with, I suppose fast food hotel for the win.
Interestingly enough, they were both real. They're both done. Taco Bell did the hotel thing, and Kellogg's did a dating app called Taboo
Okay.
for breakfast lovers. Um, I don't know if it worked. I have to do more research on whether these campaigns did anything for a cereal brand and a Mexican food brand, but
Yeah. You haven't
uh,
used either? You haven't been to the Taco Bell hotel?
I've not been to the Taco Bell. I also feel like it's kind of stupid. Like I can eat in my bed if I want to, and I can eat Taco Bell in my bed. um,
Funny.
but yeah, now that we got to know a little bit about your knowledge in really weird and obscure brands, well, not the brands, but brand campaigns, why don't we actually start to talk about your expertise? Why don't you tell us what you do? Tell us everything that we got to know about you.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks again for having me. It's really nice to talk with you guys. As I mentioned, my name is Andrew Madden, founder of Madden uh, Creative Services company. We specialize in branding, web, and digital marketing solutions for nonprofits, tech, and trade service companies. We tend to specialize in. I've been a creative professional for over 20 years. Got my start in marketing installation in large format, and been focusing primarily on branding, identity work, and website design and development for probably the last 10 or 12 years. Prior to starting my own company, I was a creative director for a marketing agency in Chicago, and managed a team of about five creatives. And took the leap of faith and had some opportunities and some good luck to go out on my own.
That's really interesting. When I was doing research on you and Man Creative, I noticed that a lot of what you guys do is very much like, I would say, um emotion, like you appeal to feelings a lot, right? And you talk about uncovering the essence of a brand and using emotion, and you talked about how like like doing I brand identity and like brand stuff like this is very important. When you approach that topic with your work, how do you actually approach the idea of distilling a brand's identity and then taking that and then making it into compelling narratives?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, brands, start from my own personal experience, right? So, what do brands, why am I attracted to certain brands? And, I think it boils down to great storytelling, right? Like what makes me want to buy or, use your services or your products, right? So, I think it can be really easy to create a company and launch products and services. But what's really impactful is that we're actually trying to connect with the end consumer, on an emotional level, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all people. We're all filled with emotions and thoughts and feelings, right? So how do we hook people in, into this brand or product or service line?
I know. I do think that emotions are a great way to appeal to people. Even if it's by making somebody laugh, you're appealing kind of to the feeling of feeling like something's funny. I know that you've also highlighted the Obama campaign as being really good. Uh, what I'm interested in is I've heard a lot of people talk about how like the Trump campaign was very like the marketing was really good, and that's why so many people wanted to vote for him. Um, from like regardless of the political stuff that you feel, I'm curious to hear what you have to say about the marketing of both of these campaigns, and what made them effective in a way to make people want to go to that vote for these candidates.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities, right? Between both campaigns, even if they're from maybe opposite
Opposing
sides
sides, yeah.
of the political landscape, right? For Obama, right, everything was about change, right? So how do you create this iconic character, right? I think a lot of times in the political landscape, you're going to lean heavily on the red, white, and blue. It tends to be very kind of uninteresting, maybe unappealing, just kind of generic feeling. And I think the Obama campaign did such a great job of really invigorating this like passion, and appeal to a younger generation. And as we know, it was very effective, right? And continues to be. It's interesting because that brand continues to exist, and the legacy carries on, right? So that's, I think, a telltale sign of successful nature of the efforts in that. And interestingly enough, it seems like the Trump administration took note of that, right, in
Yeah.
some form or fashion, and similarly, created very dynamic campaigns to attract, highly targeted audiences, right? And it was extremely effective. So, once again, it doesn't matter what your point of view is; it's how you're expressing that, how you're creating that connection with people. That really adds to that wanting to be a part of that.
I what surprised me the most about the Trump campaign specifically is that the efforts were so much in like making, because I think Donald Trump is a very controversial figure. And he causes like the him as a president and as a candidate has been controversial and caused a lot of like discourse amongst people. And I think like the fact that like the marketing of this candidate knew this and then took it and somehow made him um somewhat relatable, or as if he was I guess a for the people. I don't know how to explain it, but like I think they kind of just made him a little bit more relatable, I guess that's my word. And I think that's like what's most impressive to me, because I don't know how when you have a controversial person, it's a lot harder to figure out how to change that image than if you
Sure.
have someone who's like a squeaky clean image, which I think Obama had a little bit of a less of that a controversy behind him with his campaign. So I I think that's like, at least to me, that's like, that's in marketing wise, that's commendable.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah,
think, once again, Trump's a very polarizing disruptor, right? For better or
yeah.
worse. And so, I think in the second term, they really worked hard to kind of polish that or refine it or, strategize on the messaging to, kind of reach maybe specific demographics, right? Where they need the votes.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, obviously, I think political marketing is also very different from like traditional brand marketing, because you're also campaigning for a very different thing than if you're just trying to get someone to purchase a product. Um, but it was really interesting to me to ask that question. Um, and because you guys also do a lot of stuff with like uh like emotional intelligence and stuff like that. I thought it was really interesting to ask that question, because I feel like a lot of like emotional marketing goes into any kind of political campaign.
Sure.
I'm from El Salvador, so I'm not American. So I just kind of like, I'm speaking from someone who saw this from outside. But at least here in my country, like a lot of the political campaigns tend to appeal a lot to religious things,
Mm,
because the population is very religious. So like I think more than 80% of the population in El Salvador is Christian or Catholic. And so presidents will, even though technically we're not like a religious state, the candidate for president and the president will always appeal to like God and talk about God and following God's rules, because it's kind of like it really sort of reaches people's emotions.
yeah.
And I think that, yeah, I mean, it makes sense as to why they would want to do that, to get people to vote for a specific candidate. And like we have like opposing sides here too, right? We have like the left and the right, and it kind of just happens the same way. It doesn't matter which side is doing it; they're always talking about God.
Yeah. And to that point, I think Trump really capitalized on that Christian angle as well, right? Really drove home on that, um, you know, um, stern kind of tradition in Christian faith. And, as much as we try to keep church and state separate, right? It's
Yeah,
to your point, it's very, it reaches on a personal and deep level for a lot of people, right? So it's naturally going to be a heavy topic, whether you want it to be or not, right?
yeah, and it influences how people make decisions, because it's kind of like a dictation of how people choose to live their lives.
Yeah.
Um, But, to kind of move on a little bit from, like, the political, because I was just curious to ask you about that, but, how do you actually, like, I think you work with I know you have had a background in construction, I know that you have worked with a lot of people now, um, but when a brand comes to you asking for this kind of storytelling aspect, is it easy to find that with everybody, or do you think that, because I wonder if, for example, like we talked about like the political campaigns, I think appealing to emotions and creating a story with a political candidate might be easy. If you're also selling a product that is solving someone's problem, um, it also not necessarily easy, but there's a lot of things that you can pull from. But if someone comes to you with something that's like a toothbrush, or something really generic, um, how can you actually find a story and make that sort of emotional when it comes to a story, to like the creative part of this whole thing?
Yeah, I mean that's the secret sauce, right? Is kind of extracting the story or the point of view, right? So for a toothbrush, right? It's something that most people use every day, hopefully at least twice a day, right? Um, but there's no real excitement in brushing your teeth, but it's that idea that you can either kind of move people away from pain or move them towards pleasure, right? So, in that storytelling, perhaps for a toothbrush, right, it's moving people away from cavities, which is what you see a lot, right? It prevents cavities and gum disease. And, so once again, maybe not the most compelling story, but highly effective, right? And thankfully, I'm not very involved in
Toothbrush branding.
toothbrush branding, right? Not really my niche, but that's okay too. Yeah,
No, that was just an example. I'm curious to hear what I feel like it would pose a challenge to me because like I said, if someone's like, "Yeah, I want to be president," that's also difficult in all fairness. I'm not saying it's easy, but there's a lot of stuff that you can appeal to when it comes to emotions. I think there's certain brands that are a little bit harder to like find a story to tell from.
yeah,
Especially because I think sometimes the owners don't necessarily know what that story is, um, which is quite interesting to me. Uh, Also, I wanted to ask you, like with everything that has, I think marketing has been about storytelling for a long time. That
sure.
to me is one of the things that has doesn't change. But I'm curious if something has changed with the surge of social media, with AI, especially because you've been in the industry for a long time. So you've seen changes in marketing and how people sort of approach this. And I'm curious to hear if these changes have been, at least with that storytelling aspect, very obvious or significant or different, have changed the approach, or if that has kind of just stayed the same.
Yeah, that's a great question. So like earlier in my career, right, starting in marketing installation and rebranding, we primarily focused in Fortune 100 banking, co- um, you know, um, and so I got to experience a lot of kind of rebrands and acquisitions, at the highest level, right? So very, very big mega campaigns and you start to see that there's a lot of systematic approach to all this, right? It's over time, but it's very buttoned up and systematic, right? So um, that creates a gradual approach to like maybe some initial resistance, right? So as we've shifted more towards like digital technology and digital marketing, right, the tools have changed pretty significantly, but how we approach people is ultimately the same, right? We're trying to, before in more traditional marketing and advertising, right? We're competing and we couldn't really, it's hard to track, the amount of views on a billboard. Whereas, now we've kind of evolved into digital where we can really get very specific metrics on whether or not campaigns are working, right? So it's really helped a lot of, I think, companies and professionals, to really kind of match the creative with the technical, so that you can actually have data to back up, all right, does this subjective campaign actually move the needle for a client, right? So um, I think that the trade-off now is that everybody has access to these tools, right? There's a lot less of a barrier, right, in cost and access, right? Anybody can be an influencer now.
Yeah.
So once again, that kind of just flips the script here, right? So that's why we get into I think celebrities and influencers and once again, people are drawn to those people and want to aspire to be like them or like what they stand for, and so once again, you use that to your advantage, right? Or you can, and so yeah, it's in terms of AI, I think once again, it's just been fascinating to see that become like such a buzzword, more or less across everybody's vernacular, right? But like as it relates to marketing and design, um, I think once again we're not there yet. We're farther along, but right now it's just another tool, right? And in terms of like writing, like it's great for um, brainstorming, right? It really leaves me no excuse not to be able to write or create ideas, but AI isn't going to. It's just you could tell when a robot has written something. It has very little personality, and perhaps I think within 3 to 5 years, they'll kind of figure that out, right? But
Not now.
not yet, right? Not
Yeah.
yet, but it's quickly evolving, right? And I think similarly for design and even development, it's like it's getting a lot faster, but it's still a tool, and we still need to know how to use it and know why we're making something.
I I definitely think that AI has, at least with what a human can do when it comes to like a story, is not there yet. If you ever ask ChatGPT to write you a story, it'll do a really good job at first, and then it can't get too complex. I feel it.
Yeah.
It's yeah. Um, and also, like, people forget that AI is pulling information from somewhere.
Yeah.
You have to feed information to the zeitgeist in order for all of these tools to sort of help out with a lot of things. Um, what I think is, like you mentioned earlier, about how like basically everyone can become an influencer nowadays, and they kind of have that at the palm of their hand, whereas before it was a little bit harder. What's really interesting to me, and I don't know if like you feel this, is that I also think that consumer behavior has changed, because I think we are dealing with consumers who are simultaneously smarter and also dumber. Maybe that's the word. I just feel like people have are more aware of marketing, and marketing tactics, and marketing intent. I've noticed like younger generations are more demanding of like disclose, like people and brands and like whoever's working with them, to disclose like a lot of the stuff that they're doing. But at the same time, um I feel like I have noticed a lot of people fall for marketing in a different, um I guess, more subliminal way. um and I don't know if that influences how you as a brand reach an audience, because I feel like some brands I've noticed have become a little bit more quirky, more lighthearted, because that's how they're reaching their audience, especially when it comes to like younger audiences. If your company is dealing with a product or a service that is appealing to like a youth, I think I've noticed that happen a little bit more. Um, because I think consumer behavior has changed. I don't remember as a child looking at a commercial on TV and thinking, like they're selling me something, or anything. I was just looking at the commercial, like I didn't give it much thought. And I feel like now people are hyper aware of that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think technology has really changed the way we see how we're being sold to, right? And I agree completely that I think younger generations are so hyper aware of that, like you said, that once again, it's really important to be authentic and genuine in your approach and how you're, maybe selling towards younger audiences, right? I think that's why the influencer culture can and does exist, right? Because ultimately it's a person or a personal brand that is, kind of influencing you, right? And that's captivating. And I think once again, that's where AI really falls short, right? Because I think most people can tell if something's real or fake pretty quickly. Although once again, some of that stuff is getting really good, right? So it'll be interesting to see how that continues to evolve. Um, but
I've
I
heard.
do, yeah,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it'll be interesting to see, where we're at in 3 to 5 years, of how integrated, AI is into, this kind of space.
For sure. I've heard AI influencers are becoming a thing, which to me makes no sense, because that's not a real person. What are
Right.
we following? Um, But yeah, for sure. I think like the idea of influencers in general I think have existed in just different ways, right? Because I think in
Yeah.
the early 2000s, I think Paris Hilton and Kim Kardashian and like the socialite people, they were kind of what influencers are now.
Yeah.
Um, except they were doing it in Hollywood, not on like TikTok and Instagram and social media platforms. Um, but so like I think people have always kind of followed this type of like person who's just existing and living a life and following what they do. What I think is interesting is how young people interact with like if an influencer talks about being sponsored by brands and like, oh, they paid me to promote this product. And um I feel like I've noticed a lot of people not necessarily want to interact with it because it's sponsored, but if an influencer gets on a video and just recommends something because they enjoy it, the person watching is more inclined to use it because their favorite influencer used it. And a lot of times, influencers are also getting affiliate links or, they're getting compensation by brands secretly for promoting products, except they're not framing it in that way. So that's why I feel like I have the idea of consumers being simultaneously smarter and also dumber because I feel
Yeah.
like there's a demand for authenticity, but there's people still don't know how to tell when something is authentic and when it isn't authentic, which is that's hard for everybody, to be
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah, I think too, once again, I think about myself and how I interact, and I'm very much skeptical about the intentions of an influencer of a company until I've allowed my trust in them to be um,
Justified, maybe.
open, right? And so it's really powerful, right? Once you're able to build that trust with your audience, I'm a musician, so I'm constantly watching, gear videos and influencers and stuff, and it's pretty incredible how much more quickly I I am interested in something if somebody puts up a demo video or kind of a gear review video, right? And what's even more fascinating is so many times you hear that person at the top of the video say, this is sponsored, or this
Yeah.
isn't sponsored. I bought this product myself, and I'm giving you an honest review, right? I think that's what you keep touching upon. This smarter and dumber dynamic, right? That we find ourselves in, right? Because at the end of the day, if I already buy into what this person is and who they are, and I like them, I'm much more willing to be interested in the product or their point of view.
Yeah.
And once again, that's influencing is such an exact term for that type
Yeah.
of marketing, right?
I for better or for worse, I like as a woman, I whenever I'm gonna purchase a new makeup product, I will usually look for reviews
Yeah.
uh, online. Where I think like before, I didn't necessarily do that. I would just purchase it, and like I guess makeup, like the makeup industry it's very interesting with marketing because it has like exploded with social media marketing. But
Totally.
um, I think like for me personally, like you talked about music and it's like when I am as a woman looking for like a makeup product, I think before I would just purchase it at the drugstore because I wasn't even like my mind didn't even go to like more expensive makeup. I would just buy what was at my like arm's length. And now it's like whatever it is I want to buy, I will go look for reviews and I will find a lot of influencers that are sponsored by this brand to promote the product. And depending on who that person is, I will like give them my trust or not my trust. And
Mhm.
it usually is not necessarily about how I find myself realizing that a lot of times it's not necessarily about how good the reviews are, but more about how trustworthy I find them or how much I like them as a person. Right?
Right.
Yeah, it's not necessarily about whether or not I think they made a good video. It's like this person seems like he's kind-hearted and would never lie to me, so I will trust this review.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Yelp is probably one of the best examples of that, right? Like you're looking for a restaurant in your area and you start to read the reviews, and right away you could tell if somebody is
A fake
maybe,
review.
well, not even that, but just kind of crazy, right? It's
Yeah.
their demands are so unrealistic
Oh
in the
yeah, for
experience
sure.
that they were hoping for, right? So it, once again, you still have to like interpret and analyze that, right? And I think that's on the smarter side of things, for us all, and I think once again your example of makeup, right? It's like once you get past that point of it being um, like a necessity, or just kind of like a common thing in your life, and it becomes more of who you feel like you are, who you aspire to be, right? That's where I think once again that influence really comes in a big way, right? And it all boils down to the story that you're being told, that they're telling you, right? you know because it's an extension of who you are, right?
Yeah. And who
um,
you want to relate to, I guess.
who you want to be, right?
Yeah, I think that happens like Yelp, I think is a great example. I think like I've noticed a lot of like mistrust in Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb scores for movies. So I think before the score on a movie on Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb would be like a determining factor of whether or not a movie was good because the critics' opinions were so important. And I've
Right.
noticed now it's like people don't necessarily trust the reviews because I feel like the story behind the critics has changed. Like the narrative that surrounds them. At least that's like my impression because I've noticed that. Also with like award shows, I think winning an Oscar, winning a Golden Globe, I mean it's still prestigious. I'm not going to say that it's worthless, but I definitely think that people don't necessarily regard a movie for being good or bad because it has an Oscar or an actor, because I think the narrative around the event itself has changed so much that the viewer, the consumer, like that person who's at home just watching, doesn't necessarily trust that this is necessarily going to be the determining factor of whether it's a good piece of media or not. And I definitely think that it's because the story behind the event itself has changed.
Yeah. I think too, I think the common thread through like movies and music, right, is my for me once again, my own personal network. If I'm talking to a friend, they're like, "Oh my God, did you see this movie? It was amazing." I'm much more inclined to want to go see that versus, you know, movie XYZ has won 3 Academy Awards. And, I think that has some influence. And I think perhaps to your point, it's maybe more kind of a generational thing, right? Maybe that has more influence over a certain age demographic than perhaps more kind of, to your point, Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb influence, right? It's not always for everybody, right? Every target audience, but all of it makes an impact, right?
Yeah, no, it still definitely makes an impact. I just think I've kind of seen the story change, but I'm not
Sure.
here to say that they're worthless things. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
But yeah, no, for sure. I'm not trying to like don't cancel me for saying that the people watching. I don't think that every Rotten Tomato person is bad.
Yeah.
But Andrew, I think this is a great note to end the podcast on. But before we end it, because we are a little bit over time, I want to give you this space to promote anything that you want to promote, or if you would like to tell viewers where to find you, the space is yours.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great chatting with you, by the way. So yeah, if you want to reach out to us, we'd love to work with anybody looking to grow their business. You can reach us at madden-creative.com. Fill out a form, shoot us an email. We're always looking for new partners, new clients to help grow with. It's really important for us that we find clients that we can become an extension for and really help them grow and see their vision, and really just love doing great work for great people. So hope that this reaches somebody, and we can develop new relationships and see their vision through.
Awesome. I will be adding the links to your website and to your LinkedIn on the description so that people can connect with you easily. Andrew, thank you so much for being here. It was a great chat.
Yeah. Thanks, Daniela. Really appreciate
And
it.
everybody else watching, subscribe, like, follow. I will see you all on the next episode.